For the first time in over a year, the New Jersey Devils defeated the Anaheim Ducks. They scored 6 goals, but it came with a cost. There's a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer, pucks, pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. I think it's safe to say that win was much needed for the New Jersey Devils. After dropping their last 4 matchups, I think the Devils had this sort of mindset entering the Prudential Center. Shh, be very, very quiet. I'm hunting Ducks. It's a bad Elmer Fudd impression, but I couldn't help myself. But the sentiment doesn't change. The Devils needed this win because they're about to pack up and head on the road to Western Canada, still somewhat early in the season. And Sheldon Keefe has said that this team hasn't really had much time to practice, and traveling to Western Canada certainly doesn't make things any easier. But this is the NHL, and they just got to try to go with the punches and see what happens. But it's nice that they finally got a win at the Rock, because a lot of people were complaining that the on-ice product in front of your home fans who spend their good, hard-earned money to watch you play, unacceptable the past few games. I would have to agree with it, and I'm glad that they sort of redeemed themselves. What's on the agenda for today's episode? In the first segment, I will share some of my main takeaways from the matchup, including an injury update regarding Curtis Lazar. Spoiler alert, not really looking all that good. Then in the second segment, like I do with every post-game recap victory, I will give you guys some players that caught my eye, honorable mentions, and name my personal 3 stars to the game. Then in the third and final segment, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. All right, in this matchup, there was more good than bad, but let's get the negativity out the way, because the Devils sustained a big blow to their lineup. At one point in the second period, Curtis Lazar collided with Radko Gudas, and the result, not really all that favorable. He couldn't even get up on his own willpower. He had to be helped off the bench. He couldn't put pressure on one of his legs. And when asked about it post-game, Sheldon Keefe said that Curtis is going to be out for some time. Now, how long is that? Could it be a few weeks, a few months? Hell, could it be the entire season? I don't really know. We'll wait as more information comes our way. But for the time being, I think it's safe to bet that the Devils are going to be without Curtis Lazar for a decent amount of games. And I know Curtis Lazar isn't the flashiest player, but let me make something perfectly clear. That is somewhat of a big blow to the Devils lineup, because the one thing you cannot deny about Curtis Lazar is that he plays the full sheet of ice. He is aggressive. His offense can come alive every now and again. He's a great leader, a positive guy in the locker room, one of my personal favorite guys to interview. Losing Lazar is a bigger blow than you realize. I don't know what some options could be for the Devils. I'm sure people are going to make their own speculations within the next day or so, but it seemed like he twisted it in a weird motion, which is never good. Not a doctor, but that's just what I saw from my perspective. And speaking of Gudas, somewhat interesting that he got into it with Josh Doan a few games ago. If you need somewhat of a history lesson, Gudas injured Doan's father, Shane, many years ago. That's just what Gudas is known for doing. He's a bit of a goon, if you would. And hopefully next time the Devils play the Ducks, Curtis McDermott suits up in that game and he could sort of give Gudas a taste of his own medicine. Speaking of which, before I share some of my main takeaways from this game, Curtis McDermott was in the lineup for the second straight game, and he went toe-to-toe with Ross Johnston just 2 minutes into the matchup. And I was texting some people in the Pucks and Pitchforks group chat. I'm just saying, like, where did that come from? Like, where did that stem from? Because I don't think there was anything shown of Johnston doing anything to any of the Devils players. Like, well, I was a little confused. Look, I love a good fight every now and again, but I'm just like, was this really necessary? Like, what happened? And some responses just said, like, Curtis McDermott is just doing what he's supposed to do, which is be aggressive, and how he gets his rest is sitting in the sin bin for an extended period of time, mostly for fighting. And he's putting his 3-year, 1.1 average annual value to very good use, I guess. Well, if you're in the lineup, you might as well do what you're being paid to do, which is, for McDermott's sake, just getting into fights. A little confused about that, but I guess it was sort of to energize the team a little bit, and didn't seem to initially work, because just a few minutes later, after the McDermott and Johnston scuffle, McGinn made it a 1-0 game in favor of the Ducks. And from what I was told by some people who were in attendance at the game, the Prudential Center just went complete silent, because I guess people had this mindset saying, like, oh boy, here we go again. The Devils are just going to shoot themselves in the foot. They're not going to come back. But I must say, the Devils were generating some decent looks in the first period. Unfortunately, it just couldn't result in a goal. But you just knew that the floodgates were going to open. And I got to give credit to Reimer, who was in net for the Ducks. He was making some decent saves. But I was just like, it's going to find the back of the net sooner rather than later. And then come the second period, that's exactly what the Devils did. In the second period alone, they scored 4 unanswered goals. And then if you go into the third period, Nico Hischier scored the first goal in that respective period. So technically the Devils had 5 unanswered goals on the Ducks, and that's how you respond. But going back to the middle period of frame, Jack Hughes, he got a goal to tie the game, and basically he was collecting his own garbage out in front. It went off the leg pad of Reimer off of his initial shot, and once again he collected it and found the back of the net. Then Stefan Noesen, he scored back-to-back goals himself, one of them on the power play. I'll talk more about Noesen in the second segment, but very impressed with his net front presence and his aggressive nature. Paul Cotter, he's back into the scoring column. And at the conclusion of the second period, the Devils had their foot on the gas pedal, but the Ducks were not going to go down silently. This sort of reminds me of what the Devils have been known to do the last few games, which is, yes, they might be down by a decent amount of goals, but they're still going to try to put up a valiant effort, because in the second period, the Ducks only had 3 shots on Markstrom. Luckily, none went past him, and you can't make the joke in that sort of circumstance. Digressing a little bit, the Devils held the Ducks in check in the second period, but the third period, they got off 16 shots, and they talked about this on the MSG broadcast. The Ducks were buzzing in the third period. Despite Nico Hischier scoring within the first 2 or so minutes of the third period, the Ducks were putting up a decent fight, and Ryan Strome, thanks to a great tic-tac-toe play, was able to cut the lead 5-2, but it was too little too late. Eric Haula, he got the neutralizer goal. It wasn't an empty netter goal. It was late in the third period with like 1 minute left, and he got a right past Reimer. Once again, loved the offensive attack from some players you don't really expect to score on a nightly basis, including Eric Haula, Paul Cotter, and Stefan Noesen. Love the overall depth from the Devils. When looking back at the previous 4 games for the Devils, I think it's safe to say that they don't struggle offensively. 6-5 OT loss to the Capitals, 8-5 regulation loss to the Lightning, 5-3 regulation loss to the Red Wings, 4-3 OT loss to the Islanders. when you look back at some of those scores, it's just like the Devils scored enough to win the game. But something we've been talking about the last few years, their goaltending and their defense is sometimes their own worst enemy. Luckily, it wasn't the case in this matchup. I'll talk more about that in the second segment. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money, sports action. Join 10 million users and sign up today. I've actually used Prize Picks quite frequently myself. I love using it for basketball games. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right. Before I list my 3 stars of the game, first some honorable mentions. My first honorable mention is Jack Hughes. Hughes scored in this game, and he now has 10 points in 12 games. The reason I want to mention Jack Hughes is not because of his play this game, even though he did score. Let me just give credit where credit is due. I want to talk about sort of the mental battle that Jack might be dealing with for the time being. And Ken Danico talked about it on an MSG broadcast a few games ago, which is when you're coming back from injury, it's never easy. It's always in the back of your mind, especially when you're someone like Jack Hughes and you've dealt with a decent amount of injuries. I know people want the Jack Hughes from last year where he was electrifying the first few weeks of the season. He was the NHL's first star of the month. He could have been in the running for the Hart Trophy had he stayed healthy and didn't deal with not one but 2 major injuries. The one thing I want people to know is that you have to be patient when it comes to Jack Hughes. And I think he did have a decent goal in this game against the Ducks. Once again, he was set up by Timo Meier and Dawson Mercer. He let one shot go, went off the leg pads of Reimer. He collected his own rebound. It went straight towards him, and he scored it and found the back of the net. I have not lost faith in Jack Hughes. We just got to be patient with him. And as a former athlete myself and having to come back from injury, it's never easy. It's sort of a mental battle that you have to endure, which is you don't want to get hurt again. You don't want to let down your team. One thing I just want to say to people is go a little easy on them. Just give them some patience. But moving on, my next honorable mentions, because these two come in a pair, Brett Pesce and Luke Hughes for playing some solid defense. In fact, more than solid defense. They talked about this on the MSG broadcast when there was a decent amount of time remaining in the third period. The Ducks never got a shot on Markstrom when Brett Pesce and Luke Hughes were out on the rink together. I know when we think about Luke, we think of more of him being an offensive-minded defenseman, but in this game, he was playing very good defense alongside Brett Pesce. And Sheldon talked about how both these players were rehabbing together and they sort of formed a special bond with one another, and it's carrying over on the ice. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Brett Pesce and Luke Hughes playing great defense out there, and it seems like they're easing back into their respective roles. The offense will come for Luke Hughes. We saw it when he made his season debut against the Red Wings when he walked away with an assist on the Eric Haula power play goal. Brett Pesce, not an offensive-minded defenseman, not known for his scoring, but I love his defense, and that's going to be vital for the Devils down the road. I've been loving the development of both these respective players. My third honorable mention is Jonas Siegenthaler, who walked away with a couple of assists, but I don't want to focus on the assists. Once again, solid defensive effort from Siegenthaler, and I think he started to really come back into his own a few games ago. Like if you want to look at some of the positivity from the 4-game losing skid, I would say Jonas Siegenthaler has sometimes shown his defensive capabilities, the similar capabilities we saw a couple years ago when the Devils had that historic season. Jonas has really stepped up the past few games, and I wanted to give him a shout out. All right, my third star. This was rather difficult because a lot of players were in the scoring column, and that's what happens when you have a high scoring affair, because you got to think about like Timo Meier, who walked away with a point. Paul Cotter scored. Eric Haula scored. There was a lot of people in the scoring column. Third star, I got to give it to Dawson Mercer. Similar to Siegenthaler, he walked away with 2 assists. He got the secondary assist on Jack Hughes' goal and the primary assist on Paul Cotter's goal. Now, why is Dawson Mercer one of my 3 stars of the game? Well, he was in desperate need of a solid points day, and he was actually buzzing in the first period. And it's funny, Brett Pesce's father, who is notoriously known on social media, put out and said that he believed that Mercer was going to score in this game. Well, he didn't score a goal, but he was in the scoring column, to say the least. And Mercer now has 5 points in 12 games. He kind of needed that, like I said, because Mercer can't get off to a slow start. He needs to show that he has a lot of untapped potential, similar to what I've been saying over the offseason. Good point showing for Mercer in this matchup. My second star, I really wanted to make him my first star, but I have to give it to Stefan Noesen. Noesen is my second star. He loves to go duck hunting because, interesting fact for you, courtesy of Bill Spalding. After tonight, Noesen now has 4 career 2-goal games. 3 of them have come against the Ducks. I don't know what it is with Noesen and the Ducks. He is a former Ducks player, but whenever he plays the Ducks, I think you can more times than not assume that he's going to have a pretty decent game. When looking at Noesen's goals, he just knows how to skate. He knows how to establish a good net front presence, and I'd say he's one of the best in the NHL when it comes to establishing the net front presence, similar to what MSG was saying on the broadcast. And his first goal to give the Devils a 2-1 lead, game-winning goal, he was just looking for an open lane, and he found it right in front of Reimer. And then on the power play, once again, Noesen is just a catalyst on the man advantage. I expected big things from Noesen, but I didn't expect for him to have this sort of big impact on the power play. And for any of you who are curious, Noesen's career high in points was 37, which was last season. 12 games in, he already has 11 points. If all goes well, knock on wood, I think Noesen is going to surpass his career high. Now, why didn't I give Noesen my first star? Well, I have to save it for the captain, Nico Hischier. Hischier is my first star of the game. He scored in the third period, early in the third period, to take the wind out of the Ducks' sails to give the Devils a 5-1 lead. Hischier has just been on a tear offensively, and if all goes well, he's going to be in the running for the Selke Trophy. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. He now has 4 goals in his past 3 games, and to add on to that, he has 8 goals in 8 games. When we think of Nico Hischier, we think of an unselfish player, someone who would rather set up his teammates versus himself. But this season, I don't know what he did with his shot, but it's been magical and it's been working. He now leads the NHL in goals with 9. He surpassed Nikita Kucherov for most goals currently in the NHL. Obviously, that's going to change, but why don't we stop the count right now? Nico Hischier is leading the NHL in goals. Did you have that on your bingo card entering this season? I'll be honest, I didn't. I knew Nico was going to do well offensively, but he's been phenomenal this season. Hopefully, he can keep it up. I want him to be more selfish and shoot the puck himself because he's capable of scoring. I know, once again, he likes to set up his teammates, but Nico's got to keep doing what he's doing. All right, so those are my 3 stars. Dawson Mercer, Stefan Noesen, Nico Hischier. Those are the 3 players that I believe were game changers for the Devils in this matchup against the Ducks. Now, before I compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Shots on goal differential, 34-26 in favor of the Devils. They were thrashing the Ducks in that category 2 out of 3 periods. They outshot them 16-7 in the first, 12-3 in the second. Ducks got them in the third, 16-6, but luckily the Devils didn't really give in. Once again, they allowed the Ducks to score their second one of the game thanks to Strome. It was a great tic-tac-toe play, and the Ducks capitalized on it, but not focusing on the negativity. They were still leading 5-2 afterwards. Power play. Ducks were 0 for 2. Devils were 1 for 1 thanks to Noesen. Hits 24-20 in favor of the Devils. Giveaways 17-13 in favor of Anaheim. Takeaways 2-0 in favor of the Ducks. Block shots 13-10 in favor of Anaheim. Time spent in the penalty box 11-9 in favor of the Devils. All right, if I had to give the Devils a letter grade, I will give them a B. They won 6-2. They got some great offensive production. They answered on back, and they're finding ways to collect extra points because during this 4-game losing skid, they collected 2 points, one against the Capitals, the other against the Islanders. And now after this matchup, they collected 2 points. My thing is, you just got to do whatever it takes, especially when the odds are not in your favor. Just try to muster up as many points as you potentially can. Offense, not the issue. Defense and goaltending need some work, but it's heading in the right direction. I will give this game a solid B. Let me know what you guys thought of this matchup against the Ducks. Do you think the Devils can finally amount some more consistent wins? Do you think they just need a tad bit more of practice time? Who do you think should replace Curtis Lazar? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X-Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X-Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.